Hello world, welcome back. This is There's Layers to This. We are back. It's been a while since we put stuff out, but we are back with this episode on toxic masculinity. It's been a while since we last put out an episode. Just stay tuned and let's get into it. Welcome everyone. This is There's Layers to This. This is our recorded start to Welcome everyone.
You have to keep that in.
Yeah, I'll keep in that. Anyways, we are back. This is There's Layers to This, and we're with me, Dumi, and
I am Faith-Rose.
Awesome. Faith-Rose. Okay, so we said we were gonna record this episode like early this morning. And then some stuff came up and both of us got busy. And now it's 10 p.m.
Yes.
It's now 10 p.m. So this is going to be an interesting conversation. We're talking about toxic masculinity today, which is fun. Yeah, Just going to say fun. Yeah, anyways, because it's every time I've ever had this conversation or heard it from anyone, it always comes from a lady. So I'd like to hear what you think toxic masculinity. Well, define it and then talk about your experiences with it, and then we'll go from there, as always.
Well, I did a quick search and I took a couple of screenshots on Google. So it says, okay, toxic masculinity, there's 3 behaviors or beliefs behind the phenomenon. So it's suppressing emotions or masking, I think that should say masking, or making distress.
Oh, yeah, masking distress, okay.
I think it should be masking distress. Maintaining an appearance of hardness, violence as an indicator of power. And then I saw another one where they were saying extreme self-reliance or the need to do everything on their own, making it less likely for men to seek treatment or reach out for help financially. Shame, disassociation, and avoidance of emotional expression. Think boys/men don't cry, leaving boys/men with few acceptable emotions besides anger. Extreme aspiration for physical, sexual, and intellectual dominance. Devaluation of women's opinion, body, and sense of self. Condemning anything feminine within another man or equating affection for another man as being sexually attracted to other men, resulting in higher social isolation and loneliness or lack of social cohesion.
Okay.
So basically having very limited emotions, I guess, and always wanted to be domineering and seeing yourself to be, I guess, would you say like it's extreme alpha male? I don't know. How would you define toxic masculinity?
I don't know, man. Like this is not the kind of thing that usually applies to my vocabulary. I don't think. It's only when I came here 4 years ago when I started to hear like, oh, toxic masculinity and all this stuff. And it's like, it's like that thing you did on your podcast, on your channel where you're talking about is Black Lives Matter my struggle. Like, if you come from Africa, where even the police are black, like.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like, so you think to yourself and you wonder, is it my struggle if I don't live in that society? And even if it is, like, I mean, when you move here, you don't necessarily feel it until it's you. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And the same goes with toxic masculinity. I think for me, I'd say the most extreme parts and the detrimental things that happen as a result of, male insecurities, whether it be intellectual or, as you said, sexual, or whatever it is that is making it difficult for men and women to see eye to eye, and that stuff is being perpetuated by men, then that's toxic masculinity. So if you're, I think that's the best way for me to describe it. aside from that, I don't think I have any other definition from it. Now, like go on.
Yeah, in terms of when I'm just thinking of it now, I'm looking at it from the perspective of the society that we live in. Now, the society that we live in the West is one that is very individualistic. You have to do everything. You have to get it by yourself, for yourself. No one's going to be there to help you to do anything. Now, ordinarily, as a man, is the provider, is the protector. So it's just like all those things that a man should be or is socialized to be, then become, I guess it's those things on steroids. And I think there's toxic behaviors on both sides. So I don't think it's not necessarily just to talk about it just being toxic masculinity, because I think it's just like looking at the masculinity, but to an extreme sense. The male ego is something that we all know is there. And that's something that's there. Some men have a big ego, some men don't have such a big ego. Some men are alpha males and all of those sorts of things. And, it depends. I don't know. It's a difficult one because some of these things we're saying, okay, well, some of these behaviors are celebrated, but I guess the toxicity comes in when you look at a behavior and it's serving you to a certain extent, but I think it's serving you to the extent that it's just a mask and you're not actually dealing with what's on the inside. Yeah. So if we look at toxic masculinity as a mask and maybe a way of being that seems to be, that has some semblance of control, because I think if we just bring it down to one word, I think I would just say control of emotions, of everything, and, making sure that you're in control, you're at the top and everyone else is beneath you. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
I think it works out. It works out in a way that sort of, in certain circumstances, makes things a little bit more difficult to see. Do you know what I mean? Like, so there's certain things that I think society is okay with that men do, but those things are wrong. And so, like, for example, having a domineering nature in business, in terms of, women can't do this, you can't make decisions and do this and so on and so forth. And then men are intentionally putting women down so that they, remain the top dog. And that, in a way, I would say is toxic masculinity, because the lady is a woman. And it all ties into things like sexism and so on and so forth. And then there's things like how we behave in the home. I think there's a part of the definition that you gave at the beginning that talks about how when a person is, how can I put it? When a person is sexually domineering and they are wanting to influence and control everything, I wouldn't say it's to do with one man's emotions. For example, I think an example I like to, I've forgotten who says it, but men are as guarded with their emotional availability as women are with their bodies. That makes sense? So it's like, like women will guard, their bodies and make sure that, because that's, that's what God has given them. And the same for men. But for women, because you are the fairer being, you guard that because it's so important. And it's part of, the everyday struggle of a woman to guard that. And the same goes with men, where emotionally we're guarding that. And sometimes it becomes overboard. And so dudes lash out and do stupid things and end up getting in trouble and going to jail. A great example is like James Fortune. He talks about, I don't think he was talking about toxic masculinity per se, but he talks about how him and his wife got into an argument and he hit her, and then he was arrested and he pleaded guilty for domestic violence. And he went off to jail, he did his time and came back. And he talks about how in that time he started to work on some of the things that, men or even just people in general, never get time to think about. So it's like how COVID has made it so that people think about what's actually important in life, like what matters. And I think sometimes because men don't take that time to think for themselves and, sort of step back and reevaluate themselves, then they become toxic in their behavior. Then they forget that they're still human and they're responsible for the next person as well as themselves. And so that becomes a serious problem. And that's where I think toxic masculinity is like big. And I think one question that I have is, I think, what do you think can be done in terms of to get boys not to lash out, but to be able to speak openly, but to people they trust? Do you know what I mean? So like, I know from the perspective of being a guy that I don't necessarily like the idea of actually trusting anyone with any information concerning my life. But at certain times, there's just nothing I can do about it. I have to release some of the turmoil. So how do we get guys to be in a space where they can do
that? I believe it's choosing those people and knowing who you can trust. And I think that comes from the cultivation of such a space. Sometimes it's not so easy to say, okay, yes, speak to someone you can trust, because sometimes people don't know who they can trust or who they can't trust. So that can also be a bit problematic. If I was to answer that question, what I would say is brotherhood is so important. Family is so important. Collective living in an interdependent way is so important, because if you're living interdependently, then that means you've got a brother, you can depend on him and he can depend on you. So, I mean, you have to make sure that you are capable of seeing exactly how that relationship is progressing. And at the end of the day, you need to set your boundaries in place, because sometimes you can be in a position where you are constantly just giving and you're saying, okay, well, I need to show this person I've got their back, but they're never doing anything for you. They're calling you all the time, just draining you and stuff like that. So I think it comes from a healthy sense of understanding your own boundaries and things that you would like for yourself, but at the same time, also finding people that have a respect for those boundaries, that have a respect for you as a person. And those people are the people who will do things for you and who you could trust with certain things. I mean, I think the strongest relationships are those that are built from moments of vulnerability, funnily enough. So, it's not saying, okay, you come and you meet someone, you say, okay, when was the last time you cried or something? I mean, well, that can be a conversation, but it's probably not the first conversation that you're going to have. But creating those spaces where you can chill and you can just be real, I think those spaces are really important in any sort of environment. And I don't think it just applies to just men on their own, but then I think creating community because in the safety of community, you know that someone's there for you, someone's got your back, and they don't need to be male, they don't need to be a certain age or whatever. It's you being able to see that in people. I mean, that's just my thought.
So I want to know what's so hard about I actually really the thing that sort of like grinds my gears about this conversation, I think a lot of the time, is when people say suppressing emotions or masking distress, right? So we just found out. So today's Tuesday, and 1st of September. So at the time that we're recording this, Chadwick Boseman died Friday last week, right? So we just found out that this guy was suffering from cancer for 4 years. He was terminal for 4 years, but he probably had it from before and didn't know. So this guy's been terminal for 4 years and we didn't know, and then it happens. that he passes away. So that, yes, is distress, but would it be considered a toxic masculinity if, in fact, he didn't tell anyone but maybe his wife or whatever? Is that because I feel like some people feel like that argument to say like, no, you have to tell us what's going on. Like, is that something that is considered toxic masculinity? That's question one. Question two is coming soon after.
Well, again, it goes back to boundaries. Who's in your circle of trust? Mm-hmm. Speaking of that, I remember I've seen I think a tweet or something else people put out, and they said, imagine all the people close to him, the doctors and everyone knew that he had colon cancer, and no one said a word for 4 years. No one has said a word. Even up until this point, no one has commented on it. They've just let us know that he's passed away. But, they've respected his privacy. And I think there's something to be said about that. Like, after that, people are like, well, that makes me think, who's in my circle of trust? I think that was the end of the tweet. And I think that's the crux of the issue if we're talking about those spaces. It's about having those people who we know no matter what are going to do what's best for us. But we also need to be open to that. And, boundaries seems to be like a dirty word. Like, oh, why are you talking about boundaries? Like, you think you're better than me because you're saying you have boundaries. Look, yes, I've got a lot of energy and everything like that, but I'm not an infinite source of energy, right? There's sometimes I need my downtime. So I need people around me who respect that and who understand that. And it comes with knowing yourself. It comes with knowing what makes you tick and knowing when, enough is enough and being able to articulate that. I believe boundaries are a very important part of every single person's life. And if you are not able to impose those boundaries where they should be imposed, then you put yourself at a detriment, because then you'll be burnt out. And you'll probably, if we're talking about masking distress, maybe if you're the strong person all the time, if you're going through a tough time, you still have to be that strong person. Who are you going to talk to about that? And that's not just in masculinity. I'm sure you've seen those things on social media where they say, check on your strong friends, check on those people who've got it all together. Yeah. So there's a lot of toxicity, I guess, in the culture that we live in. And yes, the West is not the only one that's guilty of it. I mean, it's everywhere because, if we look at it on a bigger scale, on a wider scale, we can see that it is much wider than just, looking at it from the masculinity standpoint and saying, okay, boys don't cry. I think, but then are we not human beings first? And looking at the way that we are wired is different. I'm laughing because I think it was a comedian or someone. This is a bit off tangent, but looking at the different way that we're wired, like women connect everything with everything, but men like to keep things separate. But we're still human beings. We still have emotions. We still want to love and to be loved. So there's all of those things. But I think the way we process things and the way we come out with those things is different. And I think if we are like women, for example, like I know when I'm thinking about something, I'm talking about it. And as I'm talking it through, I'm processing it. When a lot of men, they probably won't talk through the whole thing and be processing it at the same time that they're talking. They'll say something, then maybe they'll go quiet. And after some time, they'll come back and they'll be like, I've thought about this, and this is the solution that I've come to. A woman does that in those 5 minutes. A man might take a couple of days to come to that same conclusion. And there's nothing wrong with those two things. It's just a different way. So I think toxicity is something that has crept into our everyday life. And toxicity is something that we need to work to get out of ourselves, really, because I think it's not helpful. And I know toxic masculinity is what we look at the most, but then there's also, toxic femininity. It's like the extreme. if we look at it from a biblical standpoint, you know, if a man is meant to be a protector, and it says, okay, you know, husbands, love your wives, and it says, wives, respect your husbands, because, like, you know, respect is a big thing for a man, whereas love is a big thing for a woman. It doesn't mean a woman doesn't want to be respected, but in order to gain respect, what do you actually do to gain that respect? Sometimes it's showing that, okay, you're capable of all these things. You can do all of these things, and that's what makes you a respectful human being. When the reality is, respect is what you give out to other people. So you can't just stand there ordering people around and, you know, saying, I know this, I know that. You know, there's so many viewpoints to look at it, to say, okay, well, is it really about being in control and having no emotion, masking distress and showing a semblance of having it all together? Or is it about being able to communicate in a way that is healthy and in a way that allows you to process emotions, to process what's going on in life? And think about those things. Like, you know, you said that James Fortune, is it James Fortune?
Yeah.
When he had some time to think about those things. I know that's a very long-winded answer, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, okay. I mean, the other question is sort of in the same vein, and you kind of answered it. But I think the suppressing emotions thing, I think from the perspective of being a guy, I think my parents, one thing they never did was tell me that boys don't cry. But my parents always said, pick and choose your times. And biblically, they always use the words, there's a time for everything. And so my dad has always said, you can't be, if we're in public, right, and something horrible happens, or something that will not only just upset you, but will upset everyone around you, you need to find a place where it's safe to let someone else know, or it's safe to now break down. Because, you know, yes, the human reaction is still there. But then the idea, because I had this conversation with my dad, he was like, yeah, the idea of boys don't cry doesn't really exist, but it's that you learn and you coach yourself to delay that immediate reaction. So, you know, like some people will, you know, let's say someone passes away and they'll immediately react to that. So the news comes and they'll immediately break down. But in the case of a good chunk of men, especially educated men, they pick and choose their time. So before they can pick and choose that time, or before they can, you know, break down, they start thinking about organizing the funeral, the money and all that stuff, organizing the family, making sure everything is sorted. Women can do that while they're emotional, which is, I think that's a talent, man. You guys win. That's a talent. You can be crying and still organizing the entire family. You guys are one. You guys are done. But yeah, that's, so my question would be like, okay, suppressing emotion, what is so bad about it? I mean, this is a practice that, this is something that I practice myself, mainly because it helps me to compartmentalize and to think rationally.
Very man.
Well, I mean, like, because I'll be honest, like, I think a lot of people who have had long enough conversations with me say that, okay, the way I think is sometimes almost inhumane because I don't seem to take other people's feelings into account. But I'm just calling the situation what I see, like from where I stand, like, okay, this is how it works, without taking into consideration my emotions or the emotions from the person receiving my advice or whatever it is. So I want to know, what's so bad about it? Like, because I don't get it. I don't get it.
I mean, I think there's a time and a place for everything. We all get emotional, but let's remember that emotions pass. I think it's all about emotional intelligence. And that's a very important trait to cultivate. I took note of the fact that you said, okay, educated people who are educated or ever would wait or whatever. But look, I don't think formative education has anything to do with it. Emotional intelligence is such a key thing in looking at how we actually process things, because a lot of the times the reasons that we react in the ways that we do is because maybe we haven't actually given ourselves the time to process those things, or we don't know how to process those things or how to react to those things. And some people have outbursts, some people, have implosions. So there can be an explosion and an implosion. That person has reacted, those people have reacted to the very same thing, but the way in which that it comes out is different. And I believe that it comes out in one's behavior, in one's, choices. Like maybe someone would not say anything, but maybe they're saying, okay, well, I can't deal with this, I want to forget about it. Then maybe they'll be intoxicated. So I think when we're looking at that whole rationale and looking at emotions, I think one of the key things and the key strategies that everyone should always remember is that emotions are passing. I could feel happy right now, then I can feel sad 5 minutes later, then I'll feel happy again, or whatever the case is. But in all of it, I'm still here talking to you, right? And I need to be able to talk to you and get through that conversation in a way that serves the purpose of that conversation. If you're here telling me, okay, Faith, you've messed up because of this, this, and this, what good is it me getting defensive? To say, no, I didn't say that, because it's how you heard it. So I think it's about having that understanding and saying, okay, what's the bigger picture here? I think that's the biggest thing, looking at the bigger picture.
And I think that's where a lot of people get it wrong, is that, okay, yes, I've heard it from female friends, I think, in conversations, because being in uni, these conversations are too regular. So it gets kind of frustrating to hear people say, no, like, girls want to see boys, like, show emotion. It's like, and all of my friends always ask the same question: why?
I don't think that boys should be showing emotion. Like, listen,
I was thinking the same thing. I was like,
I don't want everyone just being emotional for the sake of being emotional. Yes, I have emotions, but you need to be privileged to see those emotions.
Yeah.
Listen, I've got stuff to do. I need to get on with it. I've probably got the unpopular opinion, but I'll say it right now. I don't want to know everyone's emotion. I don't want everyone coming to me and crying. So what? Let them cry to people who are in their circle of trust. That's why it's about trust. It's about boundaries, because a lack of boundaries leads to so many unnecessary things.
Exactly. I come to this conversation with some gripes of my own.
I can see that.
Yeah, I mean, like, okay, yeah, because it's one of those. It's like, okay, I mean, I'll kind of slightly. We'll in this episode, obviously, we're going to touch on toxic femininity. But if you want to see it, if you want to see an episode in that, the comments below is where you tell us. But anyways, I think from an aspect, I think one of the biggest frustrations of being a guy, and especially being a guy who's now coming into my adulthood, and like coming to see like that this is the world as, as plain as I can see, like there's all sorts of debates around what a man should and shouldn't do. It seems like, over time, women have progressed and moved forward and have been more and more independent and have been able to, become very powerful individuals in society. And so, but men have still occupied the same role over the last, however long the world has been around, So for as long as men have been, like, we still have the same rules. We're still protectors. We're still, expected to be gentlemen. We're still expected to be, good fathers, expected to be good husbands, all of that, love your wives, so on and so forth. All of that has, been there. And then, like, in the last 10, 15 years, it's all just like changed. all at one time. It's like, okay, no, now we want to see some emotion. Now we want to see, like, there's so many things that people want guys to do, right? And it's so confusing. I'll be quite honest. This is like a vulnerable moment for me. it's extremely confusing. Like, okay, you want me to be strong but emotional. So I understand being strong in terms of, like, yes, like keeping everyone, consolidated and making sure that everyone's safe and so on and so forth. But you can't necessarily be emotional. Let's say someone dies. If I have to be strong for you, why am I going to be crying?
You don't need to be strong for me. You cry.
Exactly.
Cry. Do it now, Dumi. This is your time.
Yeah, that's my fake cry. I'm sorry, guys. It happens. But yeah, I mean, that's when we come to things like, for example, with the change in society and women amassing more power, and the equal playing is starting to think. It takes me back to the idea of the pig statement in Animal Farm. Everyone is made equal, but some are made more equal than others. Mm-hmm. Now, I love that book. But yeah, it's like the way things have changed has made it so that certain things that were okay because of how women were viewed in society are still okay now. For example, you know how like guys get arrested for domestic violence, but women can commit the same act and not be arrested.
Well, I think they would be arrested if they were reported.
Well, I mean, look at it this way.
Is there shame associated with reporting, saying my woman beat me up?
My woman beat me up. That's interesting. But I mean, when you look at it from the perspective of like, okay, let's take the case, the Johnny Depp. Have you heard of that? Heard about that? The Johnny Depp.
Yes, I didn't follow it. I didn't follow it too much, but then I saw a couple of headlines.
I haven't followed it quite in a while, but from what I know, it's like the relationship was abusive. Between husband and wife. And that's, always sad to see. But what was even more sad was that, like, she made statements such as, like, okay, even if you go and tell the police, who's going to believe you? And the guy had visible, evidence of, like, going through the abuse. His finger was cut off and so on and so forth. It was horrible, essentially. So you tend to wonder, right? Like, how do we teach? And maybe this is more a question for a woman. Yeah. So how do you get it into people's heads that it is not okay, to behave roughly towards men, because that's not the way you want to be treated. But also, how do you get it across to women that there is such a thing as toxic femininity? I think that's what my question.
I think you've said a lot of things, and and I'll just pick up on a couple of points. Like you're saying, okay, the world has changed, and men haven't really changed until recently, or haven't been expected to change until recently. But I think one of the issues is, in this day and age, we expect too much of people. Like, you expect a man to be your best friend, to be your confidant, to cry with you, to do everything with you. And, there's no relationship or demarcation with other things. Like, if you go to a man and you're saying, oh, I've had a horrible day, blah, 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 you're crying, it's just like, well, you should quit your job. And then you're like, but that's not what I wanted to hear.
That's so true.
But in his mind, he's thinking, well, you're asking me, that you're telling me there's a problem. This is the solution. Do what you need to do and keep it moving so that the world will be okay. In your world will be okay. Yeah. But, and that's it. And that's how a man thinks. And I don't think that we should be expecting people to be everything to us at all times, which is why I don't ascribe to the thing of saying, yeah, guys should be emotional. I don't want some next man crying to me. I don't have time to be dealing with that. You go and cry to someone else. you can't be crying to me just because I'm your friend. Because I'm your friend, you don't need to be doing that. Like, there's levels of proximity. There's a line, levels of proximity, levels of intimacy. Like, we're not doing all of that.
We have
like,
to build a
I'll
wall.
talk to you. That's it. We need to build a wall. And like, it's restricted access only, because you can't be expecting people to be everything to everyone. Of course, maybe because of the way men are viewed, in a sense, like, men are viewed to say, okay, they need to be the protectors, they need to be the, providers and all of those sorts of things. And I know women can do that. And maybe some women are saying, well, I can do everything you can do and more. Like, I'm the reason that you are able to even wear those shoes or whatever. I'm the reason that, and I mean, I don't see the point in that. I think we've moved from the point in time where maybe a man would be doing everything and the woman's at home receiving an allowance, or making sure that there's a freshly baked loaf of bread when the guy gets home and says, honey, I'm home, and all of that. I mean, like, we've moved past that sort of time, and maybe women are more empowered, they're more independent and everything like that. But I don't think that independence comes with independence should not come with the expectation for someone to think exactly like you. A man is a man. A man thinks in a way a man thinks. A woman thinks in the way a woman thinks. I cannot expect my husband to think like me. Yeah. I would be annoyed if he thought exactly like me, because that would just be a very fruitless conversation.
That would be such a hype house.
That's what I'm saying. Oh, I don't know. It'll be too much, man. Like,
I'd never rock up to your house. I promise. I will meet you where we're going. Like, I'm not coming to your house.
We're bouncing off the walls.
I haven't got enough energy for that, man.
Yeah, I mean, in everything you need balance. And I think in everything, we need to understand that we cannot be all things to all people. Mm-hmm. I do not want every single guy to come to me and cry, right? But
you heard it here first.
If you are someone who is close to me, I will have that ear for you and listen to you. But I'm not going to put myself out there, and neither do I expect any other person to put themselves out there like that. And I mean, at the end of the day, if I'm going to cry in front of someone, it's because I trust them. So how about we take it a step back and cultivate trust within that relationship before you're expecting someone just to be emotional? Maybe you're clearly showing that you're not someone who can be trusted. So why should someone let that guard down in front of you?
You've hit the nail on the head, man. That's what I wanted to hear. Because here's the thing, like, I don't like people who are like, yeah, we want guys to be emotional. Yeah, but what do you do to earn that? And it's not like guys are expecting you to just like, okay, yeah, we've been together 2 weeks, and yeah, something's happened, and it's really big. I'm not expecting you to trust me on that level. We've been together 2 weeks. No.
We've talked about having children.
Exactly.
House.
Exactly. Stuff like
children.
Like, first of all, if we've been together 2 weeks, why are you talking to me about having a house and having children? That is, yes, in my mind, that's where we're going, but
we move fast. We move fast.
We're not ready for that conversation right now. And then on top of that, if something happens to me or my family or whatever, and, we're just friends, or I just happen to know you from somewhere, I ain't finna tell you everything. I'll probably just give you the headline. Oh yeah, this happened.
I guess what you were saying then to me is that
don't be emotional.
Don't be emotional. But I think I completely agree with that, in the sense to say, okay, you don't need to be emotional with everyone, but when we're talking about, and I mean, we're not here to talk about finding the one or whatever, but, if it's someone who, you could picture yourself spending the rest of your life with, if that's where you are in your life. And, I believe that should be the purpose of any relationship. I don't think relationships should be had to see where it's going to go, because that's a waste of your time and mine. It's just a waste of time. But
yeah.
if there's that possibility, as to seeing that, then that means that in order for that relationship to progress and in order for that relationship to mature, you find yourself being comfortable sharing these things, but then also the other person needs to understand that these things take time. And I think the organic nature of relationships should not be ignored.
Not fast forward.
Yeah, let's not fast forward, because I think the way society works right now is very different, because I think we are more prone to be seen as just like, individual bubbles floating about, not like coming from, I mean, yeah, this is what I was thinking. I was like, gone are the days, like, when, like, your grandparents are from the same village and all of those kind of things. People are from all over the world. I mean, the question that I always am asked, and I find it quite annoying, is how did your parents meet? And what I say is the same way your parents met. That's my answer for them. Like,
my gosh.
Like, yeah. So I don't know. People have still got that view, in a sense.
Yeah.
To say, I don't know what people expect, but anyway, that's a bit off topic. But I think the bottom line is, we don't live in a place where we already know, we're not in such a small community that we already know about this person and their parents and all of those sorts of things. So maybe that progression of conversation is a lot faster. We live in a day and age where, we're floating about on our own and we're saying, okay, I've met you, but you don't deserve my trust straight away.
Yeah. I mean, when we look at it from that perspective, then it's very powerful, because you think about society has sort of done a switch. Relationships took much longer to form, but everything was in a sort of controllable area. Everything was right there. All the information you needed to know if someone was truly for you, that it was all right there. But now relationships happen, people are getting married after 3 months of knowing each other. It's crazy to me. I don't get that. But yeah, like people are getting into that too quickly. And then they get into the marriage and they're like, oh, I didn't know you were like this. And so, you get into a place where he doesn't exactly trust you yet. She doesn't exactly trust you yet. But you're saying you're married. Like, and you've never had, a real conversation. You've been in the honeymoon phase for this long, and you've never had a real conversation with this person about like what you truly believe your life is to amount to. You haven't had, conversations that change your perspective on that person yet, and you're telling each other "I do." That's a dangerous thing.
Well, I mean. Again, if we take it back to emotions, isn't that what the honeymoon phase is? Like, exactly. In a very emotional stage where you are obsessed with the person, essentially, and you make excuses for the negatives and all of those sorts of things, and like you tell these whole narratives in your own mind. Emotions are there, and I think marriage is an interesting thing. And I think what makes marriages work is that commitment to resolving conflict, because conflict will come. And you're saying, okay, well, you're getting into a marriage and you're like, oh, I didn't know she was like this. I'm married now and I'm just like, I didn't know I was like this. So,
no, forget it. Forget it, right?
No, we're not here to talk about marriage.
It's cool, you won. Right.
I mean, like, the more intimate a relationship is, the different things that it brings out of you. And I think your ability to be able to discuss those things is what's most important. And I think coming back to our conversation today on toxic masculinity, I think there is, I think it stems from, of course, I've already said it stems from that whole being controlled about everything. And, making sure that one is like seen to be at the top, seen to be the best, seen to be able to be, it is better than anyone and everyone, and has no emotion because they've got everything under control. That's a very lonely place to be. And I think that's why it is such a detrimental thing to be partisan to. But then again, I don't believe that people should be, telling their emotions to every single person, because I believe trust is a very important component in any sort of relationship. So are boundaries. And therefore, you can't tell everyone everything and trust everyone with everything, because you're just being silly if you do that. Because not everyone is worth your trust. Not everyone is worth your trust. And I strongly believe that there's things we're learning about ourselves every single day. But I think the most important thing, moving aside from toxic masculinity, moving aside from emotions and all of those things, is take some time to know yourself and be comfortable in that, because that's what's going to help you to be able to navigate through all of these things. I had to bring it back to my whole identity thing,
Yeah, man. Chadwick Boseman said it best. Who am I first?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like that's what you have to understand. And so this conversation on toxic masculinity is very, very I'm pretty sure if when a lot of people see this, it will be polarizing, because there'll be so many sort of immediate reactions. But what we urge you, those of you watching There's Layers to This, we urge you, please think about what we're saying. And we don't mean take it and that's the gospel, but think about what we're saying, and then only then put comments down. That will be helpful to the conversation. We have very, very, how would I say? I wouldn't say, we have very reserved views. I wouldn't say conservative, because conservative is kind of the wrong way to put it. But we have very reserved views about how people should be. But these are still just our views. Okay? Understand, these are still our views. You know what I'm saying? Like this is not like the gospel, like we got it from some dictionary.
Reserved views. Like, what is reserved?
Reserved, like, sit back and watch people. You know what I'm saying? You sit back and you watch people and you think about how much of that you want. You know what I'm saying? Like if you, very reserved.
Okay.
But definitely, we hope you enjoyed this episode. And this is me, Dumi. And
I'm Faith-Rose.
Wow, I'm so tired. I'm so tired. Yes, we are so happy to have you guys here. Anyways, that's it for today's episode. Good night.
And that's it for There's Layers to This today. This episode is one of those important conversations that we need to have as a society. Thank you so much to all of you who keep on messaging to find out when the episodes are coming in. It's just been a long time. It's been a lot of work going into this. But thank you very much for hearing us out. We hope that you enjoy the material that we put out and you are blessed by it. All right then. Thank you very much. Good night. Cue the music.